It started with a body by the wall of a quiet churchyard, a young man, gone without warning. The kind of death that gets boxed up quickly, overdose. Nothing suspicious, move on. But then there was another. Same place, same story, and another. 4 young men, all found within yards of each other. All written off as isolated tragedies, the kind no one wants to look at too closely. Police said it was coincidence, just bad luck, nothing to worry about, no threat to the public, but something didn't add up. There was a note, odd, clumsy, almost too neat. There were dating apps, messages that vanished, names that reappeared. There were patterns, right there in the open, if anyone had cared enough to connect them. But they didn't, not then. While officers turned away, families began asking questions. While the press printed reassurances, someone out there kept hunting, one by one, because this isn't a story about death. It's a story about what happens when no one listens, when the truth is hidden in plain sight, when a killer walks free because no one thinks to ask, what if this wasn't an accident? What if these men were murdered? This is a story about missed chances, about silence, about justice that took far too long, and the moment everything started to unravel, stay with us, because once the mask slips, there's no turning back. Welcome to Unveiled Crime Mysteries channel, where I unveil mysterious true crimes, some lost to time, others fresh in memory. Justice might not be served, but the shadow is unveiled. Jack Taylor was 25, single, full of drive. He knew what he wanted and chased it hard. After midnight, he drifted out of a club and on impulse arranged a date with a man, something he'd never dared before. 36 hours later, before dawn, Jack lay dead. His family sensed trouble straight away, but had no idea where to look. Stephen Port had killed him. "Are you telling us the truth, Stephen?" the detectives asked. "I'm telling you the truth, yes." He was lying. He'd already taken 4 lives. Bodies kept appearing. A sexual predator, through and through, now blamed for 4 deaths. Detectives gathered scraps, trying to see the man behind the carnage. Which clue would expose Stephen Port? What slip-up would break him? One relative couldn't even bring herself to say his name. He'd shattered her world. "He's ruined our lives. He's ruined our family. He's took our Jack away." Port sat for hours in interview rooms, flatly denying everything. His web history screamed guilt, yet he stonewalled. 18 months passed before police finally arrested him over the 4 linked deaths. "No, I don't know, Mr. Jacks, 21. We'll give you Jacks 21. At first, officers wouldn't admit there had been murders at all. Jack's sisters refused that verdict. Their brother, they said, never touched drugs. How could he have? Jack did not do drugs. They pressed harder. "We asked the police about the syringe that was found on Jack and it wasn't used. So you're telling us it wasn't used, but you're also telling us that he just sat there and ejected himself and done an overdose." The logic collapsed. Jack was one of several young men found in or near the ancient churchyard at Barking. Each had spent time in Port's flat. Port prowled dating apps, hiding behind false names. He practiced his kills online, arranging hookups across multiple sites. On Fit Lads, he targeted a young Muslim who'd never drunk or taken drugs. Port gave him poppers. The man blacked out. When he came round, Port handed him a drink. Clear, water, tasting off. Numb, half paralyzed, underwear gone, the victim fled in shame, scared to out himself. He survived. He might be the last to leave that flat alive. 10 days on, Port went shopping for prey again. Sleepy boys this time. £800 offered for a night with a 23-year-old escort named Anthony Walgate. They met on 17 June 2014. Port later bragged in letters to jailmate Cody Lackey about chemsex drugs at his flat. He lured Anthony home, spiked him with GHB, had sex with him, watched him slip under, watched him die. 2 days later, Anthony's body sat propped against the communal wall outside Port's own block. Port rang 999, pretending he'd stumbled on a stranger. He told police the lad must have collapsed. Basic decency would have kept him there till help arrived. Port ran. Officers chalked it up to overdose, not murder. A week later they arrested Port, not for killing, but for lying. Why was a young man suddenly dead outside these flats? Detectives dug into Anthony's phone bills, discovered Sleepy Boys, learned he'd been booked by Stephen Port, yet they still framed it as consensual chemsex gone wrong. Because they saw an unexplained death, not homicide, They skipped tests that might have nailed Port early. His flat was full of evidence, searches for drug rape, drug porn, scores of contacts on Grindr and FitLads, but no one looked. Port's laptop housed porn clips of men drugged and abused. Police missed them. No wonder an internal review later asked why Port wasn't investigated further. Free and confident, he struck again. Gabriel Kovari, 22, newly arrived from Slovakia, briefly lived with Port. He texted friends, "Stephen Port is not a nice guy." On 28 August, 70 days after Anthony's death, Gabriel's body appeared in St. Margaret's graveyard, same pose, sunglasses on, shirt pulled up. Police kept the shades but never swabbed them. Port bet the death would pass as overdose. He won. He felt untouchable. First body outside his own door, second one yards away in the churchyard. Power thrilled him. At 39, rejected and lonely, he'd found control in killing. "I don't know, I didn't look at her. Yeah, so I got to, yeah, for some time." Port rambled through interviews, still free to roam. 2 young men dead, both staged alike, and the tall blonde neighbor was inches from each scene, yet no alarm. On 18 September 2014, just a month later, Daniel Whitworth turned up dead against the same church wall, same pose, this time a note in his left hand. Daniel confessed he'd caused Gabriel's death during sex, felt guilty, and chose suicide in the same spot. The final line read, "Please don't blame the guy that I was with last night. It was nothing to do with him. It's all on me." The note was Port's. Had police compared handwriting, they'd have seen it. They didn't. They accepted the letter, wrapped up 2 deaths at once, and moved on. Port had escaped justice with a schoolboy trick. The note was so clumsy, so childlike, it should have raised every red flag in the book, but it sailed straight through. No one swabbed it for DNA. No one checked the paper stock. No one compared the loops and flicks of the handwriting. When Daniel Whitworth's death reached the coroner, she drilled the officers about the note's backstory. They shifted, flushed, and admitted, "Well, we haven't really done anything. It was just a note that we found on him, and we've taken it at face value." Without lab work, Port stayed hidden. Another year ticked past before experts finally branded the note a forgery. Police stuck to the easy version. Daniel was just the latest lad to overdose on GHB in that churchyard. No chain of murders, no predator. Reporters echoed the line, "Carry on as you were. No need to avoid the graveyard. There's no serial killer on the loose." Only there was, and he was still on the hunt. March 2015, Port stood in the dock, not for killing, but for perverting justice. He'd sworn he'd never met Anthony Walgate. Phone data showed they'd shared a bed the night Anthony died. The lie earned him 8 months. He served 3. While those gates clanged shut, the deaths paused. September 2015. Jack Taylor hit Dagenham Trades Hall at 10:30, slipped out at 12:30, rang a minicab, opened Grindr. At 3 a.m. he messaged Stephen Port. Despite the hour he rode to Barking, stepped onto Cambridge Road. Port's playground was the apps. Victims were just a swipe. One chat showed him asking if Jack fancied tea. Jack replied, "No, I never have done, mate." Cameras caught the pair at Barking Station, then shadowed them to Port's flat. Jack had no idea he'd walked into a trap. 36 hours later he was dead. Same wall, same pose, same syringe. Police still refused to see a pattern. Port now counted 4 kills. What slip would finally undo him? Jack's sisters ripped holes in the overdose tale. Jack loathed drugs. The syringe was unused. The spot he died was somewhere he'd never go. They combed the internet and found 3 earlier deaths in that graveyard. Young, gay older Jop Totelafa. Port, meantime, fried bacon in an East London cafe, hunted new faces online, acted the harmless regular. The sisters pieced fragments, hearts breaking. Local journalists joined in, pointing at 4 bodies within spitting distance of the blonde neighbor who dialed 999 first time round. Pressure built. A fresh detective reopened every file, gasped, rang homicide. At last, the real investigation began. Officers mapped Jack's final hours, traced every ping, pulled every CCTV frame. There he was, walking beside a tall blonde stranger. On 13 October 2015, the Met released the image. 24 hours later, Stephen Port sat in cuffs. During interviews, the facade cracked. Media blasts drew more survivors. Each told the same story: online chat, spiked drink, blackout, assault. Detectives learned Port wiped his Grindr account hours after Jack died. The net tightened. The Taylor sisters kept asking the hard questions. "We asked the police about the syringe that was found on Jack and it wasn't used." So you're telling us it wasn't used, but you're also telling us that he just sat there and injected himself and done an overdose. The logic collapsed in daylight. Soon investigators traced all 4 deaths back to the same flat, the same predator, the same blue bedsheet, and back along the chain sat that childish suicide note, once so convincing, now the clue that finally crushed him. The pressure was mounting. After months of grief, questions, and stonewalled answers, someone inside finally blinked. A fresh pair of eyes, an officer not tied to the original investigation, was brought in to look again. Not just at Jack Taylor's death, but at the 3 that came before. What he found shocked him. 4 men, 4 deaths, all of it too alike to ignore. He said, "You know what? All these 4 deaths look like they're murders, and they look like they're linked." That was it. The alarm was finally sounded. The homicide team stepped in. The real investigation, the one that should have started from day one, had now begun. Detectives followed Jack's final steps. They pulled his phone records. They checked cameras around Barking. There he was, clear as day. But who was the tall blonde man walking beside him? The Met issued a public appeal. They released a CCTV still on 13th October 2015. The image showed Jack Taylor beside a stranger at Barking Station. Within 24 hours, the man in the picture, Stephen Port, was under arrest, suspected of 4 murders. Interviews started. Port barely blinked. "So you don't recognize his face?" "I don't know," but now the truth had space to breathe. Naming him a murder suspect meant everything he'd hidden might now come to light. The arrest sparked media headlines. More people came forward, more stories, more allegations. One came from a young Muslim man. Each account echoed the same thing. Port had a system. He used apps to meet younger men. He lured them to his flat. He drugged them with GHB. He injected them. He raped them while they were unconscious. This wasn't chaos. This was method. Cold, deliberate, controlled. He used the tools of the modern world, Grindr, dating apps, online anonymity, to hunt. Officers uncovered he had deleted his Grindr profile just hours after Jack Taylor died. A panic move, one that screamed guilt. They traced messages. They built timelines. The case grew stronger, and while on remand, Port began writing letters. One of them was to Cody Lackey, a former prisoner. The letters weren't just ramblings. They were confessions hiding in plain sight. He told Cody that he'd found a body and hung up when the 999 operator asked too many questions. "Hello?" He called back, panicked, hung up again. When the police arrived, he slipped back inside like nothing had happened. Port also spoke in detail about GHB. His tone wasn't casual, it was knowing. You can't intentionally kill someone with GHB and stuff, because the taste, they'd be able to taste it and stuff, because it had quite a sour, like distinctive taste and stuff. It was like he was trying to convince himself more than Cody. Port didn't see himself as a killer. In his letters, he blamed the victims, said they didn't understand the risks, said he could lecture young people about drugs, said he wanted to speak at schools, colleges, on telly, that he wanted to become an anti-drug campaigner. He was creating a defense, saying these deaths weren't his doing, that they were accidents, that sex was consensual, that he wasn't to blame. But then came the breakthrough. The coroner handling Daniel Whitworth's case questioned the so-called suicide note. She didn't buy it. Something felt off. One line stood out. "Don't blame the man I was with last night." They'd been told the note was checked, that DNA had been run, that it had been verified, but it hadn't. Worse, the note connected Daniel to Gabriel, victim number 2. The police had said the deaths weren't linked. The note said otherwise. The coroner knew it too. She returned an open verdict. Suspicious death. No clear cause. The note was finally handed to a handwriting expert. They compared it to Port's writing, then to Daniel's. The conclusion was clear. Daniel didn't write it. Stephen Port did. That wasn't all. The paper matched stationery found at Port's flat. And crucially, Port's DNA was on the letter. The noose was tightening. Forensics found even more. A pair of sunglasses left with one victim. Port's DNA. A blue bedsheet found wrapped around Daniel. Port's DNA again. He denied it. "Stephen, you write this letter." "No, I didn't." But the evidence didn't lie. His DNA was everywhere it shouldn't have been. The fake letter, the staged scene, the drugs, it all pointed to him. The key was that note. His handwriting gave him away. When police finally had Port's letters written to Cody for comparison, the match was obvious. The shape of the letter P was near identical. It looked, in theory, like a perfect crime, a clever lie, a way to frame a death as suicide. But it wasn't clean. It wasn't smart. Port wasn't a criminal mastermind. He got sloppy.
One mistake became 2, then 3. His phone was searched. On it, 83 video clips, pornographic videos, men unconscious, men being used. This wasn't a one-off fetish. This was his obsession. He hunted using the same tools most people use to find love. Apps, chats, invites. The same methods used for dating became his way to find victims. It's chilling, but in a world where digital relationships form quickly, he simply twisted the system to suit his aims. The CCTV footage linking Port to Jack Taylor was the first thread that finally unraveled it all. Looking back, the public reassurance that there wasn't a serial killer at large felt bitter, almost cruel, because it was wrong, horribly wrong. In November 2016, Stephen Port was convicted of 4 murders. The letter he wrote, the lie he tried to pass off as Daniels, became his undoing. That single act led to a rare sentence: whole life. Port will never leave prison. He's a monster. That's all he is. He's a monster. He had no value for life, and he didn't care what he did to boys and what he would do to people's families by what he's done. For the families, the grief doesn't fade. I don't think he can put how much we miss him into words, to be honest. Our worlds have just been squashed. Port's crimes didn't just take lives, they shattered whole families. Being in prison is just too good for him, to be honest, because he's took people's lives and he's destroyed our families for the rest of our lives. He hunted in silence. But it was his own words, his own hand that exposed him. In the end, it wasn't just forensics that caught Stephen Port, it was persistence. It was the families who refused to be quiet, the sisters who wouldn't stop digging. The truth didn't come from the system, it came from those failed by it. Stephen Port was found guilty of 4 murders. He'll never walk free again, but justice came far too late. For the victims, for their families, for every warning that went ignored. This wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning, and the silence that once covered St. Margaret's churchyard was finally broken. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe for more crime videos daily.